very much. Well, James Boys joins us here in the studio. He is a US policy expert and is from King's College in London. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, how much is this visit more about symbolism than actually delivering anything real at the end of it?
Very much so. You heard amongst the platitudes in your piece there, Barack Obama saying that it's no coincidence that his first stop in his second term is in Israel. Well, of course, if Benjamin Netanyahu had had his way, he wouldn't have had a second term. Indeed, it could have been very easy for Obama not to have made it this far if he'd lost that recent election. He's come not to engage in diplomatic niceties, but to engage in what he's called a listening mode. This rings alarm bells. When Bill Clinton first sent his Secretary of State overseas, Warren Christopher, 20 years ago, he came in a similar mode, and Europeans didn't know what to make of it. That part of the world needs leadership. What is it, one wonders, that Barack Obama's going to be listening to that he hasn't heard for the last 4 years?
Dr. Boyd, what else should we expect? A two-state plan? Are they going to be discussing that? Will that even come up?
Well, this is the great problem because, of course, George W. Bush got roundly criticised in many parts of the world, but he was, of course, the first American president to vocalise the idea of a two-state solution. Barack Obama invested a lot of time in his first months in office in putting Senator Mitchell, of course, as a special envoy to this part of the world and try to solve the Middle East peace situation in about 18 months. That was obviously a sign of American hubris. That hasn't worked out. One wonders what on earth he can do in his second term as his power starts to ebb away as we move ever closer to the 2016 election cycle.
But he's going to have nothing to lose, right? He has nothing to lose.
He has nothing to lose, but very little to leverage with. And this is the great problem, I think, because Netanyahu, of course, was very adamant that he wanted Mitt Romney to be president. Obama would have quite happily had anybody except Netanyahu leading Israel at this point. So there's no love lost between the men, although they have met 10 times over the last 4 years, which is probably more than any other foreign leader has met with the president. So there's no love lost between the men. A lot of this has to do with domestic consumption. I think it's partly so that Obama can say, right, I've ticked a box, I've gone to Israel, now you can stop criticising me for that, and I can move on with my second term and start dealing with other matters.
But is there any appetite for the two-state solution at all? I mean, the Jordanian ambassador to Israel said that trying to sort that out was like two men arguing about a piece of pizza while one man was eating it.
Yeah, it's about right. You know, there was a moment, I think, where a two-state solution looked like it might be on the cards. It seems though that moment may well have passed, and I don't think anybody's expecting anything to come out of this meeting other than a couple of nice photographs for Barack Obama to send home to the wife and kids, I think. No diplomatic issues are going to be determined. If there was going to be any groundwork broken here, we would have seen a lot of legwork on the ground before Obama arrived, and that hasn't happened.
Nevertheless, though, if Iran sees you know, Israel and the US looking pretty strong, what does that say to its nuclear ambitions, or about its nuclear ambitions?
That, of course, is a separate issue. The idea of a two-state solution can be seen quite separately from what happens with regard to Iran. It's clearly not in America or Israel's advantage to have Iran armed with any nuclear weapons, of course. So, but I think that what America is going to be saying is, look, cool this, let's take this one step at a time. Clearly, Obama and Netanyahu have just been re-elected. They both think they've got new mandates. Unfortunately, that means they're both going to think they're right, and that could lead down a great road to nowhere, I think, if we're not careful.
Coming back to the relationship between the two men, Dr. Boys, the picture you see behind you, all the smiles, the handshakes, the hugs.
Sure.
You want to tell us that's all a facade, it's all for the cameras?
Well, it makes nice photographs. You wouldn't expect them to sort of stand up and sort of square off against one another, would you? I hope. It's been a
calling him Bibi.
Well, yeah, it's a 6,000-mile journey from Washington D.C. He's had to helicopter in down to Tel Aviv afterwards. There's all problems with his limousine, so he's got enough problems on his plate without having personal animosity with Bibi, I guess. So,
my friend Bibi.
Absolutely. Don't forget, Netanyahu interfered in the American presidential election to try and get his friend Mitt Romney elected president, and arguably Obama did something similar in Israel. So there is a certain degree of personal animus there, which isn't going to help the situation.
But they sort of need each other at the moment, though. I mean, Netanyahu's in a pretty shaky position at the moment, so if he looks good, you know, with a world leader, won't that help Netanyahu?
I don't know. I think he's just been re-elected. He's got a rather shaky, as you rightly point out, coalition. There's questions as to how long that coalition can stay in place. There's no guarantees that he will be the leader of Israel for the remainder of Obama's term in office. So I think that Obama would rather be dealing with anybody else, quite frankly, at this point. Let's just wait and see who that turns out to be, if indeed there is anyone else.
Yeah. Dr. Boyce, take us through the last three presidencies in the U.S. and their relationships with Israel. Clinton, George W., Obama.
Sure.
How different were they?
They were different. I'd like to add George Herbert Walker Bush to that list, if I may, because interestingly enough, for a Republican president, he was seen to have been more pro-Palestinian. His Secretary of State, Jim Baker, once famously said, effectively, the hell with the Jews, they don't vote for us anyway. We don't need to pursue that option. When Bill Clinton came in, he was seen to be far more pro-Israeli than his predecessor. That was continued under George W. Bush. I think Barack Obama has tried to take a more nuanced approach to try and be more of an honest broker. The problem is, of course, if you try and do that in that part of the world, that seemed to be anti-Israel. And he's paid a price for that. If you remember when he was in Cairo in his first term, he gave that address at the University of Cairo, and he said that both sides, both Israel and the Palestinians, have a right to say that we've been wronged. So there was an attempt to sort of walk a fine line. He sent Senator Mitchell there to try and strike a peace deal. That seemed to be undermined greatly by Netanyahu and by settlement plans. So I think Obama is really sort of a bit sick to the back teeth, quite frankly, with dealing with this part of the world. And he doesn't see a solution in sight. So why invest time and energy there if there is no solution?
Do you think the Palestinians will feel will have got anything out of this trip?
I doubt it. He's going to go to Ramallah, of course, tomorrow, I believe, and then go back to visit with Netanyahu once more. So it'll be interesting to see what he gleans from that trip to the West Bank and to see how those talks develop. But interestingly enough, that will be followed by a visit from the Secretary of State. Usually we would expect to see American diplomats laying the groundwork for a presidential visit, not the other way around. This isn't how diplomacy is meant or usually works.
I guess it's just a feel-good trip and a bunch of postcards, huh?
It's a distinct possibility, I'm afraid. Sorry. I wish I had something more enlightening to say, but I think that's about the size of it.
Dr. Boyce.
Thanks very much
Thank you
indeed
very
for
much.
your
Good
insight.
job.
Thanks.